There's so many ways that we can gather information. We live in the information age. Would it be too much to ask if we could source our material?
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast.
Minisode.
So we homeschool. I know, you just put me in a box. I was helping my son with a paper the other day, and there was a lesson there that I think would be helpful, maybe an analogy for appraisers. I want to share that with you, but first I want to remind you that we are sponsored by ANOW Software. Folks, this is the best group of people. I reach out to them on a pretty regular basis and just, give them suggestions and updates that they might. And I'm telling you, they get on it and they do it. They listen to their clients. ANOW.com is where it's at, and that's what you should be using to monitor and to manage your appraisal business. ANOW.com, it's ANOW.com. All right, folks, so I was sitting on the couch with my son, and we were doing a paper review. It's a paper that he's writing for a class that he's in, and we do kind of a co-op that's a weekly thing where we get together with other homeschool families. There's, orchestra and band and choir and engineering and chemistry and drama and, just a plethora of classes that you can take at this co-op. And he happens to be taking a class that is being taught by my wife. And so on a pretty regular basis, she asks me to be his writing mentor, if you will, and to help him with his papers because, she's already with him and she has a built-in bias there as the teacher. And so I'm able to come in and read through his paper and say, hey, what about this? What about there? Do you really want to say it this way? You really need a more impactful thesis statement. Let's work on that. You forgot a period here and a capitalization there. And, we just work together on these papers. And I was with him, written a paper about safety and security versus privacy. And he had a quote, it's a famous quote in there from Ben Franklin. And there was no source cited for the quote. And I challenged him. I said, I see you've got quotation marks here, which is great, but do you have a source for this quote? Is it really a quote, or is it something you did from memory? Is it, is there a source that you can reference in order to make your paper more credible? And he and I kind of got in a discussion about when to source and when not to source and how to source and basically referencing where you got material, right? You've all done this, the APA format, there's different ways of writing papers and different ways of sourcing your material. And of course, with online sources, now there's a way to do that properly. And audiobooks have a way to source their information. And, there's just so many ways to let the reader know where you got your information. All right, now pause for a second and just think through that for us. Is there a lesson in there for appraisers? I want to share a lesson that was obvious to me when we get back from the break. I want to first pause here and remind you of something else that should be very obvious to you at this point. If you're a long-term listener to this program, you know how much I love ANOW software. ANOW, of course, is the ability for me to keep track of every assignment, order, every appraisal, and how my business is doing overall, to kind of take the temperature or the overall health of my business on a regular basis. That's what ANOW will do for you as well. You can check them out by going to their website. It's ANOW.com. One more time, it's ANOW.com. Welcome back, everybody. We're talking today about sourcing. We're talking today about credibility. That word should mean something to appraisers. And I was specifically working with my son, and he had a quote in his paper with no reference. And I said, don't you think it would be better to have a reference? It would add, quote unquote, credibility to your report if you can source where your information comes from. Well, look, I can see two lessons in this for appraisers. Okay. Number one, we use a variety of sources to get information. We might use MLS. We might use plat maps. We might use the zoning department. We might use a phone call to the records department. We might use tax assessment sheets. We might use personal inspection. We might use photographs. We might use online sources. There's so many ways that we can gather information. We live in the information age. Would it be too much to ask if we could source our material, right? What comes to mind specifically is on the drive-by form, the 2055 Fannie Mae form, about halfway down on the right-hand side, there is a little box, and I don't know the question verbatim, but it's basically, where did you get the characteristics of the house? It may even specifically say, where did you get the square footage of the house? And there's a little, a couple things you can check. You can check the former MLS or appraisal files materials or tax assessment sheet, and then there's a box that says other with a brief line that you can describe where you got that information. I think it's super important to fill that information out. I don't want to be held liable toward a state board or my client or my intended users for not describing where my information came from. So I think that's lesson number one that you might use from your early junior high school days of learning how to source papers that you're writing that can be applied to appraisers. Are you sourcing your material? Are you telling us if you got it from Zillow? Are you quoting Zillow, right? Are you telling where you got the information on the characteristics of the home that you're appraising? Number two, and this is probably the bigger and to me more important lesson to be learned here, and that is, are you sourcing yourself? Meaning, are you explaining how you came up with what you came up with? I love Tim Anderson's explanation of this. He says, it's one thing to do it, right? It's a whole other thing to explain why. I think why is one of Tim Anderson's favorite words. Why did you do that? It's okay to use $65 a square foot as your adjustment, but why did you do it? Do you have something in the report and or the work file that helps you to be credible, that helps you to source? It's one thing to quote Benjamin Franklin. It's a whole other thing to source where that quote came from, both from a liability standpoint and from a credibility standpoint. If you want more tips on how to be more effective as a real estate appraiser, I highly recommend you go to my website, theappraisercoach.com, click on the memberships and become a member of the All-Star team. It's these kind of things that come out constantly, which will help you to be a better, more efficient appraiser business owner. Check it out. It's theappraisercoach.com/memberships.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.